Making this video, it's kind of bugging me just from the get-go because I like to, if I'm gonna do something that I release in a public forum, I want it to be professional. Uh, but the circumstances do not accommodate for professional production right now. I got a mic, I got Audacity, that's about it. Uh, but I really wanted to make this video in spite of that because there's just an absence of this kind of informal advice when you're in this kind of situation. Like there's resources online that are just like walls of text. There are like statistics that don't really mean anything to you as an individual. Uh, so this is my experience so far and how I'm trying to get along after my diagnosis. My name is Max. I'm 18 years old. I'm about to be a senior in high school, and I've been diagnosed with a number of disorders, including schizophrenia. I'm on the autism spectrum. I've attempted suicide 3 times, with the most recent attempt having been made a little over a year ago. I'm making this video because I've discovered that there's some very practical advice for people in my situation and similar situations that doesn't seem to be readily available in this format. It might be out there, I just haven't found it. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia on April 13th of 2016, about 3.5 months ago. And since then, I've been searching for some tangible advice on what to do when you're having to cope with this information and establish a sense of normalcy without ignoring your symptoms. And that can be a pretty tough balancing act to maintain, especially when it's just like you're at ground zero of it all, you know. But the only resources I can find are the aforementioned walls of text and canned statistics that they don't they don't really mean anything to me, at least. Like that is it's looking at it just like a math equation, and that's not what I need at this point, or what I needed, I should say. Uh, and there's a lot of just vague promises about things getting better with time. Just like wait. Um, there's some validity to that. Like time is the healer of all wounds and all that shit, but it's nice to have something other than that. Um, the events that led up to my diagnosis have given me a very personal image of the very real flaws and deficiencies present in the American landscape of mental health care. Um, Following a major psychotic episode, I was taken to the emergency room for a psychological evaluation. After over 5 hours of waiting and being shuffled around to different rooms and all that shit, answering the same set of questions about 6 times, I fully consented to a stay in a psychiatric ward. Unfortunately, there were no available rooms in the wards the hospital was capable of putting me in until like 1 a.m. that night, maybe 2 a.m. With the exception of a facility that the attending nurses visibly winced at the mention of and essentially labeled as a last resort. And that shit's not encouraging. It really isn't. um, and some of this is messed up, but you end up finding humor in it just because of how, not to make a joke, but just how crazy it is. It's not all super dreary. At least it's not for me. Just roll with the punches. You're gonna have to learn that anyway. I was finally placed in an adolescent psych ward where I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and prescribed high doses of lithium and Seroquel. Many of the patients I befriended had the same diagnosis and med scripts as me, despite having wildly different symptoms, like night and day. The drugs made me a borderline zombie and rendered me completely apathetic. Um, they made me inactive, like I wasn't causing problems for myself or others, I guess, but I certainly wasn't getting better. Uh, Anyway, it was only after I was discharged that my psych eval was made available to my personal psychiatrist, who's like decades of experience and like a very like I definitely trust them. And they declared that virtually everything I had said and reported in my evaluation made a schizophrenia diagnosis painfully obvious, I believe her words were. Uh, so then I had to be weaned off of the erroneously prescribed meds, all the while juggling the arrangements for when I would return to school and how much of the missed work I would have to do. Uh, this process was immensely stressful and aggravated my symptoms considerably. Uh, I was prescribed an antipsychotic, and then I attempted to return to school, but I experienced severe anxiety attacks every day and frequent auditory hallucinations, never managing to complete a full day before I was in the office, having to be picked up, which was kind of humiliating and definitely just heavily discouraging for me about my chances of finishing the year with passing grades. And I had like a second downward spiral, but instead of psychosis, it was depression. Thankfully, I did pass, kind of by the skin of my teeth, but I did. And I've had a summer break to get my bearings, figure some things out, and I want to share what I've found to be helpful in these initial months following. Like, it's a drastic change in your life. Uh, it's not like earth shattering. Uh, well, it depends on the context, but you figure out that it's more manageable than it initially seems. Initially, it's terrifying. You find your ground, you get your bearings again. So this is, to be blunt, this is the bad shit. The most painful thing to get over may very well be that you'll invariably get mixed reactions from friends, family, people you're in relationships with when they find out about it. Uh, some may doubt the diagnosis, others may just refuse to acknowledge it. Some people might just not care, like it won't make a difference one way or the other, and then you might wonder if you're taking it too seriously and stuff like that. Um, Several of my friends simply cut off contact with me once I told them about it. Biting the bullet on that is the first order of business when you're processing this, but you'll realize something, which is the fact that it doesn't matter how other people perceive your condition. Even people with good intentions can simply not know how to approach you about it or provide help. So it's pretty damn important to never place other people's perceptions of you above your own and realize that you're capable of helping yourself by normalizing your symptoms and developing coping mechanisms and everything like that. The symptoms of schizophrenia are not actually that unusual. They're just very obvious, I guess. Uh, Everyone has been sure that they heard or saw something that didn't end up being there, or felt highly confused and paranoid when there wasn't a logical reason why. And maybe you can understand there's not a logical reason, but that doesn't help. Uh, Schizophrenics just deal with these things more frequently than other people, especially in the initial phase of getting the right medications and professional help. Once those things are sorted out, they become a source of structure rather than anxiety. And I think that everybody initially is intimidated by this, and they feel like it's a race against time to just get everything squared away. But you don't want to rush that, because then you can end up being in a situation where you're not getting good help or medication. Uh, but by that point, like, you can't be expected to be getting better anyway, so you just accept it, and then it doesn't end up helping you. Let it happen at your own pace is basically what I'm saying. The next piece of advice I have is to find as many personal outlets for stress and as many creative outlets as possible. I have learned the hard way that even if you already have a rock solid outlet that you absolutely love, it won't always be what you need. I am a pretty passionate writer, and I always have been. It's always been something I can turn to, whether it's like a diary or poetry or story writing, anything like that. But my symptoms can make it very frustrating to write something cohesive or for creative stuff just like personally pleasing. Uh, this has led to me rediscovering my love of drawing and painting, and I've learned that I have an entirely different interest in composing music. And well, it would be ridiculous for me to claim that I'm already stable. I deal with depression and anxiety on a daily basis, and I still don't really know what will happen when I go back to school. That's the scary part about being in this early phase where you're still learning to understand the illness, make adjustments for it in your life, and just realize like what parts of you it does affect and doesn't affect, because it's not really clear. And the symptoms of schizophrenia and how they interact with you are it's a very like it's like a neurochemical thing and all this stuff. It's hard for even like for a professional to tell you this is exactly what it translates to in terms of how you feel and how you process things, because it's very subtle in some ways, and that's like, you just have to feel it out. But regardless of that, even stability by itself isn't going to make you happy or necessarily just feel better. You have to find what's therapeutic for you and feel that you have self control. I feel that it's easy to dehumanize schizophrenics because it can seem like we are purely defined by our illness and that our illness has free reign over us to the point that we cease to exist as individuals. But if you take anything away from this, whether you are schizophrenic, if you know someone who has schizophrenia, or if you really just if anything is going on with you, it doesn't even have to be something that you have a diagnosis for. I like firmly believe that there's a lot of stuff that we might call mental illnesses or disorders that we as well, I mean in terms of like medical progress, but also just as a culture that we very readily just see as normal issues or whatever. So I wouldn't pass judgment on that just because you don't have a doctor telling you that there you have like a disease. I don't think it should have to be at that point for you to take this into account. Uh, but the conception of you just being drowned out and losing yourself in this horrible thing, whatever, that conception is pure and utter bullshit. Even during the worst of times, you never cease to be you. You never become an autonomous puppet to whatever you have. Sometimes it can feel like that, but even if you don't think of it in the moment, in retrospect, you'll realize that you don't go away. You're still there. Um, and you should never accept the notion that other people are better trusted with defining you as a person. Even if you feel like at a point other people are better equipped to tell when you're safe or not. Like if you think that as a person, you just aren't that good at telling when you're starting to go into a downward spiral or stuff, and you know that there are people that will kind of step in for you if you seem to be in danger or whatever. You still understand your like the essence of you better than anybody else, at least hopefully. Uh, this video is aimed at a very niche group since schizophrenics only make up 1% of the population, but it's equally applicable to people dealing with depression, other issues like the stuff that we can't diagnose yet that I mentioned before. Just if you have some shit going on, doesn't matter what it is. But schizophrenia is a very it's stigmatized, and it's an alienating stigma that's attached to it that it isn't unique to schizophrenia. It can seem like it is because like in its portrayal in media and stuff like that, and the fact that because it's kind of uncommon, there's not really a reason for everybody to have a sense of what it is and how it works. But that alienating stigma can make it seem like a death sentence compared to any other mental illness or problem. But as someone no longer on the backslide, as far as I can tell, I certainly beg to differ. All right. This is this is gonna get weird. I'm just gonna let you know if you've listened this far. Thank you very much for doing so. I hope you've gotten something out of it. But at this point, comparatively, this is the point where things are gonna kind of go off the beaten path. I had something resembling a script for what I've said before now, kind of like a index cards kind of thing just to keep myself on topic. But I recorded all of that stuff earlier in the day, around like, I want to say like 2 p.m. And it's currently just about to be 8 p.m. And in that time, some shit has happened. And maybe it's because I'm crazy. I can't know these things. That people who are schizophrenic or schizotypal or schizoaffective or whatever, which, that's still on the spectrum and whatnot. We tend to have eccentric ideas and beliefs. I certainly have eccentric beliefs, but that's not really, this is the wrong video for that. But I've had a schizophrenia related incident today that I feel is relevant to anybody who might be clicking on this video because they're dealing with it, or they just want to know what's going on with it more. Because I got some fresh breaking news for you, world exclusive. I have something resembling a summer job, we'll call it, where I go over to this guy's place and we do like grunt labor, whatever. I've been doing like mixing like concrete and patching up his garage and stuff. It's hard to kind of lead up to this, but the thing is, this is something that's like an established arrangement, you know, something that I've been used to ever since the summer started. And like, anyway, I kind of want to start over and do another take of this right now, but I'm not gonna, because I need this to be real and authentic. You are currently listening to a performance art piece, I will have you know. But I was really hot and sweaty, muggy as hell out, and a bunch of shit was just bothering me at just the right slash wrong time and all this. And some stuff was kind of getting on my nerves. And a long story short, I started to have a psychotic episode. And this person, uh, I won't try to go into this, they did not respond how I might have tried to respond. You know, like, it is just an instance of when someone kind of fucks it up, if you will. They were getting like very confrontational with me. They seemed to think that I was just trying to act crazy for the sake of it, or like I wanted to get out of the work or something. And long story short, yet to say that again, Jesus Christ, I ended up hitting my head against a cinder block wall until I had a forehead injury that resembles a bindi. Which, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's the red dot that I believe it means you're married in Hindu culture. I think that's what that means. Anyway, so yeah, I had a psychotic episode some time ago, still quite recent. I'm still having some after effects from it. But here is just an example for you, dear viewer, anybody dealing with some shit. You learn to bounce back from it. You know what? I'm gonna have to explain a lot of shit. I'm gonna at some point I'm gonna have to go back there and finish that job, and that's gonna be awkward as fuck. But you know what? I'm getting back on my feet after I got knocked down on my ass, and here's some proof for you. It can be done. You can be crazy. You can lose your shit for a day, and then you can get back on that horse. You know what? Kind of feels good. Kind of feels good to be crazy every once in a while. And to take a step back and to view more just like general, like genuinely talking about this. Here's the thing. I gotta be real careful about how I phrase this, because if the wrong person hears what I'm about to say, it could translate into some not good times. But something that has genuinely really helped me, and I think it can help like anybody in this kind of predicament. There's an upside at some point, you know. Because as a part of you, like, I'll talk about myself now. Don't want to sound patronizing, like I'm talking down to you or anything. I kind of like being crazy. I mean, there's definitely downsides to it, but there's a virtue to being crazy, because you can perceive the world differently, and it can be pretty fun. You know, like sometimes when I'm out there and I'm working in the sun and stuff, um, something that's like technically happening is like my symptoms are getting worse. Like my thoughts kind of get muddled, and time kind of seems to go at a different rate. And I'm kind of having a bunch of inner monologues all at the same time that are just tracing over each other and whatnot. And technically, that is my symptoms rearing their head. And that kind of stuff is technically what I'm taking my medications for. And whatever. But the thing is, when you're treating schizophrenia, the objective is not to cure it, because at this point there's not a known cure for schizophrenia. You can get to a really good and manageable point with medications to where you can basically seem cured, but you're just technically not. But your symptoms, in one way or another, are always going to be around, and they can actually get to a point where if you can balance them, they can enhance your human experience as far as I'm concerned. because I like to study philosophy and stuff like that. I'm only like I I love like metaphysics and thought experiments, shit like that. But I don't really pledge myself to a religion. I'm kind of aligned with a god, but that's a can of worms. That's a can of worms right there. That's not relevant. But I think that one of the reasons that like historically, like a lot of the people that we think were schizophrenic, like I believe Joan of Arc, because like she frequently heard the voice of God and stuff. It's possible she was schizophrenic and stuff. Like schizophrenics historically tend to take on very spiritually centered roles in whatever culture they find themselves in, or in the history of like more recent like European culture and stuff like artists. There's an overlap with that, because you can have very valid like you can technically be like hallucinating, and as long as you just recognize what's going on and you're like, this is that thing that happens to me, these are my thoughts becoming a bit different. um, it's kind of like using an entheogen, I would argue. And an entheogen is a substance, like a drug or something like that, or a flower potentially, something like that. A drug that is imbibed with the purpose of inducing a spiritual experience. And I think that schizophrenia can take on like a drug-like quality, and it can be very spiritually valuable, because I've had wonderful spiritual revelations that didn't lead to delusions while I was having what's technically, it's like the very mild form of what we call psychosis, where you're losing touch with reality. So don't be scared of that. Like, it's something that you can moderate, just like anything else. You don't want too much of it. Well, I don't. There's probably not a point where might have a point where I would consider too little, because I like this. I'm getting something out of it. I'm gonna write a book. So that's the other thing. Like, I get something that I've discovered, and it's an illness. That's what it is. But it doesn't have to be a totally drab affair, and it's not just something that makes you worse. Like, it doesn't objectively make you any worse as a person or anything. It makes you different. It makes you eccentric. And really, the people who end up being endeared, by and large, in history for whatever reason, they're eccentric motherfuckers. So just roll with it. Don't lock it down. Don't be ashamed of it. If other people don't know how to take it, that's their problem. You're just too real for them. That's the problem going on right there. This video hasn't had segues for shit, so I don't know how to transition into a closing statement. But if you, like me, are crazy, and I don't know, if you're whatever, like, you got any questions, feel free to ask me questions, comments, or private messages, whatever. I barely even remember how YouTube works anymore. They're always changing shit around. Yeah, whatever. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on any kind of social media stuff, really. I don't care about that shit. I think Twitter's for vain motherfuckers, just to be honest. Well, you know what? This is kind of upside of being a schizophrenic, is that you can be meandering as hell with your conversationalism, whatever, monologuism, perhaps. Like, even if you haven't cared about like the rest of this video, your attention certainly being occupied by this, I would imagine. And you know what? What more could you hope for? Is to hold someone's attention if you wish to, with your eccentricity. Uh, so in summation, if you're crazy, then learn to like being crazy. Just it's like having I don't want to get too into this, but it's like how people can drink in moderation. Uh, it's a little bit incriminating if I use that to parallel with anything else, so I'll just say drinking, even though that's like the most harmful one that's like widely available. Um, uh, Learn to moderate and enjoy it with responsibility. And if you're not crazy, I am sorry for your loss, because it's a grand old time. You know, the highs are really high and the lows are really low, and it's like one of those RPGs from Japan where the higher up the difficulty goes, the more experience points you're getting for all the shit that you do. And if you're schizophrenic like me, then it's like what's I don't remember the difficulties for the Devil May Cry series. I know there's like Dante Must Die or something. I You know what? I think that everything I've said speaks for itself. I ain't even gotta close out on something cohesive. So yeah, yeah. Peace out.